halfway down, we on Chof Gimel Omid Base. I hope the lighting's okay. I've got this light here. I don't know if it helps on it.
It's fine.
Is that all right? It's actually higher up, isn't it? Is that all right? Okay. Further up. If it is, then I'll change things. Remember, we saw the Mishnah last week, and we spoke about people coming, the Eidim coming, or potential witnesses coming. And you remember they went to this courtyard. Whether it was Shabbos or not Shabbos, in particular, we were looking at Shabbos. They went to this courtyard in Yerushalayim, and remember, second line of the Mishnah, it said it was called Beis Yazek. Nice name, Beis Yazek. We'll see more about that right now. And you remember they stayed there. What did we say? Originally, remember, they were confined just to that place. Because the rule is if somebody comes from outside the Tchum, outside of the 2,000 Amos, and goes beyond that for whatever reason, you're normally confined to that place. You can't walk any further. You're allowed 2,000 Amos, about a kilometer from where you are. Imagine you're out in the sticks somewhere. You're allowed to go 2,000 Amos. Of course, the whole city is considered one area. That's not a problem. But so if you're coming from out of the 2,000 Amos, you may have been traveling to Yerushalayim to get there on Shabbos, which you can do. Normally, you were confined to this place, this courtyard in Yerushalayim. It was called Beis Yazek. But if you remember, there was some advantages and incentives because there was a wonderful party that was thrown. It doesn't say it was catering, but no doubt the best caterers were there as it had to be an incentive. So they wanted people to come because people may always think, there'll be other people who saw the moon. And the issue is that maybe there were not other people who saw the moon. So please come along and enjoy yourself. And all the meals will be laid on and a great time had by all. So says the Gemara, Iboilahu. They asked them a question. Who's the they and who's the they? Well, normally they is one yeshiva asking another yeshiva. Remember the seats of learning in various yeshivas. And one area would be asking another, Iboilahu Beis Yazek Tanan or Beis Yazek Tanan. That's good. What exactly does that Gemara mean? But notice there are two different spellings there. In other words, don't forget these Mishnayos are all Baal Peh, which means they were word of mouth, not written down, and people just say they came to the place called Beis Yazek. Now, what was this Beis Yazek? So there are two ways. Maybe I know we've seen what we've got in our Mishnah, but there are two ways you could read this. Either Beis Yazek with an ayin, or Beis Yazek without the ayin. You see, the ayin is swallowed up normally. You wouldn't normally, unless you're a real Sephardi, you'd hear the ayin. So you may not hear that ayin. Is the word therefore Beis Yazek with an ayin or without an ayin? Have you got that? Just where it says Gemara on Chof Gimel Omid Base. Yeah? So which one of those is it? Says the Gemara, let me explain what I mean. Again, Iboilahu Beis Yazek Tanan or Beis Yazek Tanan, with an ayin or without an ayin. Says the Gemara, Beis Yazek Tanan. If it's with an ayin, then the meaning is Beis Yazek Lishna Ma'alya. It's a very positive name for this courtyard, a big courtyard. Remember, they're all staying there. And remember, this goes back to the initial time when people were confined to that area. It's called Beis Yazek. Yes, they're confined in it, but it's a very positive word that's being used. Dichsiv, we've got a posuk, and you've probably got it around the side of your Gemara too. This is a posuk in Isaiah, where the posuk says, Vaya'azekehu vayesaklehu. And again, we're just focusing on the linguistics here. Vaya azakehu means, yes, it was like there was a fence around it. Vaya azkehu. So yes, you are confined. It was a fence. Vaya saklehu, and the stones were removed. Interesting. The word skila, of course, liskol is normally to stone, or lesakel, often find that in the Hebrew, actually means to de-stone, to remove the stone. So the Gemara has now picked up a pasuk in Yeshaya, where you see the word vaya azakeu means it was fenced off positively, because we don't want people coming in. It's fenced off, and you can do that for good reason, because you want to normally, you're trying to avoid other people coming in. You fence off an area. Have a look at Rashi, vaya azakehu, silgu begeder avonim. They put around a fence of stones, be'igul, around, kamo tabas, like a ring. You place a ring on the finger. It's also circular. It keeps the ring goes on the finger. Talking about a ring which goes on the finger. It's circular. It goes around something. A tabas, of course, very positive indeed. A ring. Therefore, we're saying it might be the same thing here. They were encircling that area. It was a great place, and that's where it's quite a positive word. Beis yazek. Again, if you're Sephardi, you'd say Beis yazek and pronounce the ayin very clearly, a guttural. So is that why it was called that? It was, yes, encircled with a fence around maybe, but the idea is you've got this place where a great time had by all. It was a fence keeping in those people who've come that great distance maybe, and it was a party for them. Very positive. A fence only for those people. Continues the Gemara, or Dilma, perhaps, Beis Yazek, beginning of the line, without an ayin. What does it mean if it's without an ayin? Lishna Tsarahu. Word Beis Yazek is not a positive word at all. In quite the opposite, it's the Loshen Tsa'ar. Pain, anguish, kidechsiv, and here we find a pasuk using the word yazek, and this pasuk comes from Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu Yud, Vahu, have you got the word there? Vahu osur bozikim. He was, there you are, osur, matir asurim, the bound, he was bound, bo zikin. Zikin is like chains. Why is this negative? Because they had to stay in that place. In other words, you can look at this in two ways. It was a fence around, very positive. Those people who've come all that way, they're going to have a great time. Or you say, no, they're confined. If you remember, they've come all this way. They can't travel. They can't walk out. Do you remember? Originally, those people who've come beyond the Tchum, beyond the 2,000 amas, beyond the kilometer or so, they were confined to this place. So it's as if they're in chains. They're chained to that area. So
it's as if they're in bitud. It's as if they're in quarantine.
Absolutely.
Bitud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good. They're. Oh, you again. I suppose you could look at it positively. You could. Nobody else is going to bother you. You're on your own. But you're right. No, normally, of course, the bidud would be negative. People likely to prefer to get out of that situation. Says the Gemara, Omer Abaya, Toshama, come in here. What did this Mishnah say? They threw tremendous party. There was meals on the house, as they say, on the Bezdin. The Bezdin were supplying all the food. Great cook, great chef, sudas gedolos, kadei sheyeh regilim lobai. In order that they should be accustomed to come, they would want to come. So it sounds like it's a very positive situation that they're living it up. It would sound more like, therefore it should be Baya Azke with an ayin, which is a positive word. Yes, it's a courtyard. Yes, it's with a fence around maybe, but it's a positive. It's an area in which a great time was had. Says Gemara, no, not necessarily. Maybe, I mean, there are two sides to this. Yes, on the one hand, yes, there was a party, but on the other hand, they weren't allowed to leave. So you're not, that's not much of a proof. Says the Gemara, Dilma Tati Havi Ovdubahu. What does it mean? There were two Tati, remember Trey? Trey means two. Trey plus three. Trey is two. Maybe two things Avdulahu happened to them. One was positive, one was negative. Number one, positive, the meals, but negative, the fact that they're confined to that space. So that doesn't tell me necessarily what the word was. Was this a word? And I suppose you'd say Beis Yazek was if it's positive, it could be they're using that word, the Bezdin are using that word, come here, you're going to have a great time. Or is it Beis Yazek for those people feeling that they're confined and therefore it was called? So you've got both aspects here. Yes, they were confined initially, so they wouldn't be allowed to move outside the courtyard. But remember, this was only until Rabban Gamliel made his decree. If you remember the Mishnah from last week, Rabban Gamliel Zokiru said, no, this wouldn't be fair. We're allowing them to walk as people from Yerushalayim would be allowed to walk, certainly within the area of Yerushalayim, and they'd be allowed outside Yerushalayim a further distance of the Tchum. So this was only initially. Why did they have this name? It's nice to get to the reason behind things, but in fact the Gemara can't prove it either way. So there is a positive and a negative understanding of where they were going. Yeah, they were going to have a great time, but on the other hand, they were confined, as I say, until Rabban Gamliel then extended and allowed them to leave after they've given their testimony. So they've given their testimony. Yes, a hand up from David.
Isn't it unusual to have such a short Gemara? And also the Mishnah seems to have quite a lot to it, but the Gemara is only picking up on this one pretty superficial point.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. You want to know that there's not much. I'll explain also why. You'll see in a minute the next Mishnah, which itself will pick up some of the points about, they're going to examine them and test them to see. That itself will be in more detail in the next Mishnah. Yeah, and after that we will have Gemara explaining more. So whatever we've got here is really in short to what's coming up now, and there's not much else to say. You've got the 2,000 amas aspect, how far they could walk. We've got it mentioned in this Mishnah. That's where the Eidim would come and they would be examined. There's not much to say about that because the next Mishnah will go into more detail. Yeah. So in answer to your question, the next Mishnah goes into more detail, and perhaps after that, or even it will be self-explanatory as we go through this next Mishnah. So see if it's all there. Otherwise, there's not much. And we know there are some small Mishnahs in Shas. It's not always a lot. If there's not much to say, that's a very powerful point. Actually, not much to say. Don't say anything. Which reminds me of a wonderful Dvar Torah coming the end of Pekudei. If you remember the tunic of the Kohen Gadol, remember? Parmoin v'rimoin. Do you remember the base of the tunic? There were the parmoin and the rimoin. The rimoin were the pomegranates, looked like pomegranates, no sound. And in between they had the bells. The bell, not the bells and the whistles, the bells and the pomegranates. And you remember, there was the noise, of course, from the rings, a wonderful noise. So you heard when the Kohen Gadol was coming, of course, the rings at the base of the tunic. And the Pasuk says, very interesting in Pekudei, you remind me of this, David, because the Pasuk says there that it was Parmoin v'rimoin, right? Imagine the tunic, at the base of the tunic going right round. So which one is in between which? If you see what I mean. Do you say the pomegranates are in between the bells, or do you say the bells are in between the pomegranates? Well, it comes to the same thing because it's one after the other. The Pasuk says that the palmoin is besoicho rimoinim. The palmoin, that means the bells were in between the pomegranates. And the people will say exactly this point. The pomegranates were silent. The bells would make a noise. The noise, the ring, should be in between the pomegranates of silence. In other words, there's some people who think if they've got nothing to say, you've got to say something, just talk. And when I've got nothing, I've really run out, then I'm silent. There are other people who remain silent unless they've got something important, well, not so important, but something of substance to say. And that pasuk is telling us exactly that. Remain in the latter group. In other words, you don't have to just, as they say, stum, as they say, stum to chat, stum to talk, just do. No. If you've got something to say of worth, say it. Otherwise, keep silent. And that's what we're saying here. If the Mishnah hasn't got anything in particular to tell us, it's all clear of its own, it won't just say something, just to fill up the space, so to speak. So therefore, you're quite right. This is a Mishnah where there isn't much other than the naming of the Chotzer, which clarified. But now let's look at the next Mishnah.
Can I just ask a quick question on that Mishnah, just about a different word which crops up occasionally, the word chachomo, meaning...
Yes, good one, yes. We mentioned that in the Mishnah.
Yeah, and so we talk about chachomim all the time, and we know what we mean, but if it's a chachomo,
yes,
that means, I think that always means a midwife. And
yes, it does.
So why? Because why is a
that's her speciality.
Babies and nothing else?
Right. We don't normally find ladies, of course, they can be very gifted and well-educated, but normally the wisdom is on the practical sense, and where they really came into their own is in this area of being a midwife. And that was really the main area of the chokhmah that we find. Yes, of course, we do find the Gemara is full of, wise ladies, but in the main, it was on the practical side, on the, say, being a midwife. Whereas with a male, normally it would be the chokhmah that you'd go for the Torah understanding, etc. So that's why you do normally find a chachomim. In fact, even a lady who was wise, you'd normally call her a bas Talmud chacham. Which is the normal way to say that, yes, she is wise. Yes, she might be the daughter of a Talmud Chacham, that's true. But you don't find the word Chacham or being a wise lady. As I say, in the main, it would be on the practical side, particularly the, being a midwife, the speciality, and that's, absolutely, not much more I can say on that. Yes. Okay, next Mishnah. So now more details around what we mentioned in the earlier Mishnah, and this is quite fascinating, where we're talking about how did they examine the witnesses. Okay, Keitzad boidkin es ho'edim. Zug shebo rishon. The first, what's a zug? A pair. Yeah? So you've got a pair, of course, we need two edim to say they saw the moon. Now, again, yes, we've had examples where sometimes a witness was to try and fool the Beis Din, but not necessarily. They may have just made a mistake. Particularly have some wonderful nights. And you may well have seen some clouds, some low clouds, and it may actually look in the same shape as a crescent moon. So, yeah, they were really just checking to see whether these people really did see the moon, or maybe, I wouldn't say a figment of imagination, but maybe something else, the light, the clouds. Okay? So what happens? The first pair that comes, again, Kate said Bodhi this way in the Mishnah, Zuk Shebo Rishon Bodhi Moisa Rishon. First come, first served. You don't say that somebody else came, and you say, oh, after me. No. You were here first. First people to be checked, which is fair enough. Again, you wouldn't want people to be put off. They're rushing there and saying, well, there'll be other, even if there are other people, they're not going to let me come first. They'll let the particular prominent individuals come in. No. You're the first in the queue. You will be examined first, and therefore, if you actually saw the moon, it will be on. I wouldn't say on your head, quite the contrary. It will be considered the Eidim of this month. Wonderful. Okay. What do we do? There it does look like if you say greater, it might be the older person. Actually, that often happens. I was once in Antwerp on one occasion, and I was acting. Very nice. Was asked to be one of the Eidim on the Ksuba. And I'd come from London, and there was another witness from Antwerp, very nice chap. And we had to sign at the bottom of the Ksuba. So as you can imagine, I kept on saying, no, you go first. And he said, no, you go first. Right, well, you can toss a coin. So the Rob there, Rav Kreisvit, Zichronin of Rocha, he looked at us and he said, who's older? Great, just go for it. So we had to admit who was older, and that's what we did. So whoever's older, there is a certain amount of say seniority or whatever. It's a good way to ensure that keep the peace. Okay, so God l'shebohem va'oimrim loy, and they say to him, third line of the Mishnah, Emor, tell us. Keitzad ro'isa es halavona. Now here we get into some wonderful details. How did you see the moon? Okay, what does that mean? Lifnei hachama o la'achar chama. Now this is a very interesting example where Rashi will take us through the way you'd expect to learn this Mishnah. And in the end, the Gemara will tell us this is not the correct understanding of the Mishnah. Okay? So Rashi will take us through. So you see this Mishnah, and often happens when you have Rashi on the Mishnah, he will say whatever you think the pshat and the understanding of the Mishnah is, which sounds very good. What does it mean, lifnei achama la'achar chama? What does it mean you saw the moon in front of the sun or behind the sun? Have a look at Rashi. But before we do, have a look at the next piece of the Mishnah. Litzvayna or lidroima, to it north or south of the sun. Okay, let's have a look at Rashi. Says Rashi, long Rashi, Hachama holeches la'olam. The sun moves. Now, of course, as we know, Rashi, they did know from the Gemara as well, that of course it's the earth moving round. But as we say in even common parlance today, you say the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Of course, it's the earth spinning, but that's the way we call it, rising in the east. So the same Lashon used here, but with Rashi. Hachama huleches, moves across the sky through the movement of the earth. Mi mizrach ledoroi. Now, don't forget, we're talking about the northern hemisphere. We're not down, South Africa or South America or anywhere. In the northern hemisphere, Yerushalayim, same for us. In the northern hemisphere, it crosses during the day, starting in the east, going to the south. Now, it's not exact south, obviously. It's in the sky. It's southerly points, yeah? Because it's not directly overhead, unless you're, of course, at the equator. So it's not directly, but it's its southerly point as it crosses the sky. And then Midorim Lamarov, from the south across towards the west. Fair enough? In the northern hemisphere. Any questions, please go for it. Okay.
Yeah,
and
can
then
you say it again? Okay, I don't understand the south bit. So the Earth is spinning. So the sun appears in the east, and then it moves over to the west, doesn't it? I don't.
what does it do? Where is it at midday?
Well, midday is directly above, isn't it?
No, if you're in the equator, yes. If you're not in the equator, it will not be exactly directly above you. It will have been at its what they call its southerly point. In other words, if you're facing the sun, you'd be facing south, even though it's very high up in the sky. The direction would be south in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it will be the north.
But don't we know this from, estate agents particulars always talk about south-facing garden.
I'm sorry?
Estate agents particulars will often talk about south-facing garden.
Oh, yeah. There you go, absolutely. Yeah.
In the middle of the day, the sun is you're facing south. You've got the sun.
You'd have the sun. Absolutely. So it's moving from east to south. Nobody's saying it's actually directly opposite south. Of course, it's not. It's high in the sky, but it's at its southerly point as it crosses the sky. Is from the east across. You'd say it's in the. In the direction of the south. But it's not at the horizon of the south. Yeah. Clearly, it's up high in the sky. But you'd be facing south. Yeah, high up.
David, there's also the ski slopes. They talk about south-facing ski slopes. You're going to get the sun better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Unless you're in South America, any ski slopes down there? I'm not quite sure. But anyway,
there probably are.
Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah, if there's south-facing, and then you'd have the sun all day. Of course, that's you're talking about midsummer. If it would be midwinter, then of course the sun would be that much lower. And of course, the further north you go, as you really move up north, Finland, you'd find it it really is down, it's south as it crosses at a very small angle. Yeah, but it will be south in the northern hemisphere. Okay, Rashi says that as an introduction. Keep going, and then of course it moves, and it is particularly in its later summer. It would move in beyond west. It's going now towards northwest. If it's as you go right across the sky. Yep, and then it goes. So again, umimar of the Tzofon, from west. It might dip further north. You're actually moving towards a northerly direction. Okay, and they bring a pasuk Shenema, as we know, of course, ourselves. But the pasuk in Kana says that Holech el Dorim, the Soivev el somebody goes across the south and then dips, of course, at night, really down below as it goes, and then picks up again. Okay. Now, the halavona eina niras biyom shloshim. In day 30, what is special about day 30? That we're now moving to Rosh Chodesh. Day 30, it's a 29 and a half day. So in day 30, you're now at Rosh Chodesh time. When will the moon be visible around Rosh Chodesh time? Says Rashi, la'olam elasomoch lishkias hachama. It will only be visible close to sunset, right? As we know, the moon, as it's circling around the earth, it passes the sun. Of course, if it's exactly spot on, you'll have an eclipse. but that normally won't happen. It will be in the plane, if you like, of the sun. It moves across. You can't see any of the moon anymore because the sun is shining on, the other side of the moon. And then it would move as it moves, and you'd see part of that. You'd see that crescent moon. And when would you see it? It's just around Shiur time. Yeah, as the sun's setting, there you'd see that small crescent. And as the month progresses, it will be higher and higher up. Obviously, it's getting larger because more of the moon becomes visible as it's further away, if you like, for us. For us looking at the moon, it's further away from the sun. Okay, keep going in Rashi, please. Why is it only seen Shiur Sechama? Now, it's true, it's only a crescent moon, a very slim, thin crescent moon, but why shouldn't you be able to see it earlier on in the day? Why only at sunset? Says Rashi, I'll tell you why. Shemitoch, beginning of the line. Mitoch shehi daka. A ktana, it's a thin, small crescent. Eino niris ba'oicha chamo bigvu rosa. When the sun is in its full brightness, midday, even late in the midday, you can't see, because of the brightness of the sun, you will not be able to make out the moon. Number one, it's very close to the sun, but besides that, the glare of the sun will be far too much for the small reflection, which is the moon anyway. So you won't see it during the day, you'd only see it at Shiur time. Okay, keep going. Now, that's a proof, because we do not ask if it's to the east or the west of the sun. It would be to the east or the west of the sun if the sun was close to midday. Remember, if it's close to midday and you're facing south, and then you could say, oh, the moon was to the east or the west of the sun. With me? But the Commissioner doesn't say that, because everybody knows midday and during the day, you will not see that moon. The glare of the sun means that you will not be able to make out the moon. You will only see it just at sunset. Of course, the glare of the sun much less, and therefore you will make out this small crescent moon. Okay? As the Mishnah doesn't say, did you see it to the east or the west? Because it's impossible to see it during the day. Shema Mino, from there you hear, Ein Nires Lohem B'Dorom. It's not visible when the sun is at the south. If the sun was, the sun was towards the south, then you'd say the moon was on the east or the west of it, right? Number one. So it's only visible at Shiur time. Because if you think, this is what we think, and Rashi is taking the simple understanding of this Mishnah. Later on, the Gemara will change, but we think, we ask the witnesses, did you see it in front of that? The sun is about to set. Did you see it just in front of the setting sun? Or behind it? And that will be towards the north, yeah? Because it's in the west right now. So did you see it further north? Fair enough. So that's the question, a good question. You saw the setting sun. Did you see that small crescent moon ahead of it? That means towards the north, or behind it, which will now be towards the south. With me? Will be Gemara Parach. The Gemara is going to ask that question. The Mishnah said, look at the Mishnah again, please. The Mishnah says, what's the question? Did you see the moon in lifnei hachama or la'achachama? Litzfeina or lidroima? Says Rashi, the Gemara will ask, lifnei hachama hainu, beginning of line of Rashi, hainu litzfeina. That question seemed to be duplicated here. If it's in front of the sun, that would be to the north. Behind the sun would be to the south. So it's strange to ask the same question twice. You with me? So with a simple interpretation of the Mishnah, it looks like we're doubling up on this question, which is very strange. And continues Rashi, of course you can't ask im lidroima. You can only ask if it's on the south or the north. I've got the word of the north there, should be in the Bach. Yeah. If they're both in the west, then you can ask, is it on the north or the south? Which is exactly the same of saying, is it before the moon, before the sun, or is it following the sun? Continues Rashi, if actually they're all in the south, you can't be of the north or the south of south. You're in south. With me? As Rashi explained earlier, it would either be the east or the west. But as our Mishnah said, did you see it in the north or the south? It must be that it's the sunset, the time of sunset, not during the middle of the day. Says Rashi, if it's in front of the sun, it's fine. That seems like the same question duplicated, asking if it's to the north. The sun is moving as it's setting more towards the north. You with me? At the westerly point, it's moving towards the north. Okay, let's just finish the Rashi. I see your hand, Malcolm. The imlacharel, if however it's behind the sun, harezel etzadorim. So the Gemara will ask the question that it looks like these two questions are exactly the same question, just formulated in slightly different words, but it's the same question. Did you see the moon in front of the sun, behind the sun, which means to the north or the south of the sun? Malcolm, you'll have to come off mute.
Oh yeah, thanks. My question is, why are they asking about the moon and the sun? I mean, I thought this is about spotting the full moon or not the full moon or something. You know, it happens at night, doesn't it?
Number one, it's not the full moon. The full moon is
not the full moon. No, sorry.
No moon.
No, spotting the moon. Yeah, okay, but
that's exactly the point. If, as we'll see, the Mishnah will tell us only one of those is possible. If they say they saw the moon in front of the sun, they didn't see the moon. It's a trick question. The moon at sunset will be just behind you. It's a new moon. The moon is circling. It's just past the sun. As it circles round, it's always behind and following the sun. That's why they ask that question, to ensure that they are telling not necessarily the truth. They haven't made a mistake.
But what I'm thinking is this. So you're saying that, but is there a specific time that it has to be seen? The first opportunity, is it to see the moon? And that happens at sunset?
It will always be at sunset. That's exactly the point. You cannot see. You see the moon. The new moon always follows the sun. At sunrise, therefore, as the sun rises, you won't even see that small moon because the glare of the sun will blot it out. However, as the moon, right, at sunset, as the sun is setting and you get less glare of the sun, then you'll be able to see that small crescent moon. So the question they're asking, I said, it's not a trick question. They're trying to clarify whether the alien really saw the moon. So the question they're asking is, was the moon behind the sun? That's where it's meant to be as a new moon. The old moon actually will be before the sun. Yeah.
Did they know? Did they know in those? Did they know that it was it is a reflection? No, did they know that it's the sun's light? Well, the rabbis in this time, did they?
Absolutely, and we'll mention this Rambam in 1 minute. They were extremely well versed in astronomy, and they knew exactly where the size, where it's expected to be. And incredible about this Soito Ibel, we'll get to that in a moment. They were extremely well versed in astronomy, knew exactly where the moon should be. The old moon is always in front of the sun. The new moon is always behind the sun. Okay? And that's the question they're asking here. Have a look further on the Mishnah, and you'll see how well versed they were. Okay.
I mean, we had this, Norman, didn't we, several weeks previously about the moon being either behind
we did.
or in terms of...
Yeah, very good.
I still haven't fully understood it, but anyway.
No, that's a very tough, probably the toughest Omud of the whole Masechta, if not other Masechtas too. Although some good notes there. What we were talking, remember a lot. In fact, they bring that as a proof. I'll show you in a moment as how well versed they were in astronomy. Do you remember how many hours there were between
the
actual sunrise? There's 6 hours you can't possibly see the moon until and where it would be and how much time. Yeah, very tough. But that shows you how well versed they were. Have a look here.
Can you just I'm sorry to hold this. Can you just briefly explain them again when you say, so the beginning of the new moon is in front of the sun and the end of the old moon is behind it, or is that what you said just now?
Almost right, but in fact the opposite.
Opposite, yeah, right. But the concept. So what does that actually mean? Behind
I tell you. Let me explain. You've got the sun. The moon is traveling round the earth. My head is the earth. Okay. Here's the sun. And you've got the moon, which is coming round. It comes round in between us, obviously massive distances here. As it comes round, the moon comes round my head. My head is the earth. Looks a bit like that. Yeah. Okay. It's going round in that direction, right? Like that. So if you're looking from above, it will be anti-clockwise, correct?
Yeah.
Nodding from Peter there. Now, as you get towards the end of the month, it's coming round, and as you're looking from me to the sun, slowly, eventually you will not see that moon because the sun will be shining on the other side of the moon, the side that I can't see. So as it comes round, it's for us looking, obviously it's not, for us looking, it looks like the moon is ahead of the sun. At sunrise, the moon would be rising, followed, and of course, as it's still dark, just before sunrise, you'd see that small crescent moon. Then you'd have the sun rising, and of course the glare of the sun, you wouldn't see it anymore. As you get to Rosh Chodesh, they're bang in line. If it's exactly in line, it'd be an eclipse. Normally, it's in the plane, it'll be up down here slightly displaced, but you won't see the moon, but you can see the sun. As you move away, and you have now what's called the new moon, the sun will then be in front of the moon. With me? You will only see that moon as the sun is setting and the glare is much less. You'd then be able to make out this very small crescent moon. So that's why you have before or afterwards. Now, to have a new moon, therefore, they would ask them, did you see it in front or behind the sun? If they say they saw it in front of the sun, it cannot be the new moon. Because the new moon always follows the sun. It's after that point where you don't see the moon at all. As the moon starts to veer and move away, as you're getting after those 6 hours, etc., or when you had the moilad, of course, coming up this week, wonderful, you got the moilad. As it moves slightly, then you would see part of the moon, and therefore it would look very much like the moon is following the sun. Yeah? Was that all right, Mervyn?
Yeah.
Good. Back to our Mishnah. There were further questions they asked. I'm looking at the line that begins Litzfeina. Have you got Litzfeina? So Litzfeina on a droma, which until now we think is the same question as we had before. Then the Mishnah continues, Kama hoyo govaya. Okay, how high was it from the horizon when you saw it? So you'd have to, whether you're using fists or some way to explain how high it was from the horizon. Again, crucial, the Chachomim would know what to expect the answer to be. Otherwise, pointless asking them. Well, we'll see in a minute. That's a good question. Have a look at Rashi. Kama hoyo gavoy min haaretz lefi re'iyas einechem. According to, we're not talking about actually how high was it in miles and kilometers and million, whatever it was. No, we're not interested in that. You, visibility, looking at the moon, how high was it? You know, put your fist out. Is it 2 fists or whatever? You come up with some type of measure that you'd have to explain to the rabbis. Or what's this la'ayin hoyonote? This is a good one. Look at Rashi, please. Roshe hapagimo. The eds, what normally called the pagimo, is the bit that's missing. When you've got a crescent moon, you've got a piece which is missing. That's poigame, missing. And the edges, normally called the horns, yeah? The point, where were they facing? In other words, even though you've told us that the moon was following the sun, get a tick for that, tick in the box, got the right answer. Which way were the horns facing? Towards the sun or away from the sun? Okay, very good. Look at Rashi here. I've got a square and a round bracket, so it's not over helpful. Which one is he talking about? He's presuming, I don't know why you have both in here, but it presumably, whoever the printer's putting this up, I'm not quite sure. It's the, look at the square brackets is the one we really want. Although I know you've got the round brackets, and that looks more like the moon. It's the square brackets, which is a crucial one. In other words, was it facing to the north? Like, look at the square. Can you see that? The bracket, the square bracket. Oilet sadorim, because there, look at the square bracket. Or which way was it facing? In other words, you've got the sun, and then you've got the moon. You've got the tick in the box because you said it was following the sun. Good. Which way were the horns facing? Were they facing to the north, like the square bracket, or like the other square bracket, which way round? One of them is correct, and one of them is wrong. Tomorrow we'll deal with that. Okay? So there's another question. They knew what the answer was meant to be, and that would lead them to find out whether really they saw the moon or didn't see the moon. Keep going. Says the Mishnah. Beginning of line is
what are the bracket? I don't understand. What's the bracket? There's two.
I don't know. I do not understand who put the bracket in. I don't know. I don't understand that bracket. It's the square bracket, which is crucial. Why you got a square and a round? I think I know what it means. I'm not quite sure why.
One the sun and one the moon.
I'm sorry?
Is one the sun and one the moon?
No, not really, because it's meant to be L'tzad Sofein. If it's L'tzad Sofein, it will be the square brackets. You see, I would have expected the other way around, though, quite honestly. the second diagram first, and it's as if those square brackets is pointing to where the pagimas are. You with me?
I see. They're the horns. They're the horns of
the
the
horn.
moon.
Which bit of the horns? It may have done it the other way around. In other words, the horns, looking at the square bracket, and it's the round bracket is pointing to where the two horns are. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So it's they're pointing upwards, which is the Tzad Sofon. That's what you're saying.
No, don't forget it. You're in the west, so north would be further to not up, because not up is up in the sky. Don't forget you've gone to south, west, so it would be more to the right.
All right, they're pointing to the right. Okay.
Or do they point to the left? And I think the round bracket is pointing to where the horns are. That's the way I understand it. Keep going, and we'll just finish this off if we can. Here we are. What does that mean? How thick was that crescent? That's going to be a tricky one. I don't know how you're going to have to. I mean, you'll have to have something. You'll have to show them. The Bezin will have to show them whether they show them, hair's breadths and things, and to show people how wide was that crescent. So the Bezin would have to come up with something. Presumably they've got diagrams, and we said later on they do have diagrams. So they would point to diagrams on their blackboard. I know now it's whiteboard, but let's say blackboards or shapes. Later on, the Mishnah will tell us about these shapes. In fact, in the very next Daf Chof Daled Amud Aleph, which we haven't got to, it talks about Rabbi Gamliel had loads of diagrams, and he would point. Did you see it looking like this? Which way round? Like the police, making out some culprit. So that's exactly what then happened. And presumably the same thing here. Was it this thickness you saw it, or this thickness? Yeah. So those are the questions they were. I'll keep going in the Mishnah, please. Okay. If they said they saw the horns towards the moon, towards the sun. Lo Omar Klum. No good. Across, you're out. Can't take you. Why? Lo Omar Klum. And Rashi just says, Mafarish Bikmara. And the reason is, you never have the horns facing the sun. Whether it's early in the month, late in the month, new month. Because, as we know, the sun is shining on the moon and it's reflecting the sun. So, of course, the horns of the moon will be in the other direction. With me? And that's the question they were asking back to Malcolm. When they're asking this question, which way, the direction of the horns towards the sun or away from the sun, it must be away from the sun, because as we know, the moon is reflecting the light of the sun. So you can't have the horns facing the sun. The other way around. Malcolm.
Can I I've got the Steinsaltz. There's a comment.
Yes.
It says, the sun has never seen the concave side of the moon.
Yes.
Since the light of the moon is merely a reflection of that of the sun, and a rainbow is also produced by the sun.
Hold on for rainbow. Rainbow's going to be the last part.
Sorry.
The last line of the Gemara.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
Concave and convex.
Yeah, concave. When we say concave, I'm talking about the horns making the concave.
Yeah.
The sun cannot, if it's shining on something, obviously it's shining, and you'll see the horns, if you like, will be in the other direction. Yeah. So concave, convex. The point we're really making here is which side will it be the horns towards the sun or away from the sun? It doesn't matter. The beginning of the month, the end of the month, you'll never have the horns facing the sun. Okay? Now there's more to do here. Let's just finish off. After that, Then they would bring in the second man, and they would examine him too. What does that mean? If their words were correct. Now, anywhere else in Shas, remember we have had two Eidim coming saying they saw this murder. Sadly, quite relevant today or yesterday. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. But anyway, if you're checking on the Eidim, if their words are in line, Edus and Kayemes. And that's the way you'd expect to translate it here. If both their words are in line, muchuvonim, parallels, the same, Edus and Kayemes. We'll have a look in a minute on the Rambam before we close. What about all the other pairs? You've accepted these. It could have been another 50 pairs, especially if coming for the big meal. You still ask them a couple of questions. Says the Mishnah, Lo shall hoyu tzrichim lehem. It's not that you need them anymore because you've already had the kosher eidim. Elo kadei lo yetzu b'pachi nefesh. They shouldn't go out disappointed, disheartened. Oh, they came all that way and they weren't even used. We want them to come on other occasions. So if we put them off, and they'll say, oh, the chances are so many people came. But if you at least you ask them some questions, they may feel that they were worthy, or it's worth coming. The Dayanim checked up on me and everything else. Yeah, it's worth coming, and therefore not to put them off. We do ask them questions too. We probably haven't got time, but I did want to talk. Have we just 1 minute, Peter? If you could just bring up now the Shekel HaKodesh. Remember, what did the Mishnah say? Let's recap. You check to see whether their words are the same. Muchuvonim. Please look at this Rambam. One of the Sforim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, called on Hilchas Kiddush HaChodesh. And he's got on this one of the Sforim, of the many Sforim of Reb Chaim. Now, look at this Loshen top line. Look at the Rambam on the top line. Look at that. Whoa, that's different. What does that mean? That means, look at the Shekel HaKodesh, letter number Chof Vov. Have you got it? You can point as you come down to Chof Vov, down. No, down in the Shekel HaKodesh. Second line of the Shekel HaKodesh, written by Reb Chaim. Chof Vov. Nimtzu divrei mechuvonim lama shenoida b'cheshbon. This is your point about being familiar with astronomy. They were very familiar with astronomy. They knew exactly. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Let's go for a bit bigger zoom to. Let's go for. Okay, go for it. Oh, wow. That's all right. That's good. Move across the page. Chavov, yes. Nimsa'u. You'd have to move. Actually, maybe worth going down to go to 200 from 400. Zoom to 200 to 200. What else can we have? Well, 200. Let's try 200. Yes, that's good. In other words, it's a very different interpretation the Rambam's giving than the way we just learned. We said if their words are in line, we accept them. That's not what the Rambam writes. The Rambam writes, are their words in line with what they expected to hear astronomically? Have a look. Hamaforshim bigmora pirshu, fourth line down. Nimtzu divreim mechuvonim zeh lazeh. If their words are in line with each other. V'gam Rabbeinu, and the Rambam himself, Pirush Kain B'Somchi, he explains that later, and it's got to be in line. In Halacha Zayin, next line down. Avul Khan, Hoisif, here the Rambam's added. Shetzorech sheyehei mechuvonim, they need to be in line. Gam lema shenoida b'cheshbon, as they know without calculations, their astronomical calculations. She'im lo kain, if not, b'vadai, certainly edusun b'teilon. Their edus is not correct, it's botel. Vim ein edusun mechavnim zelozeh. And if the edus doesn't tie up one with the other, im kain, if so, echod mehen ein mechavin lecheshbon. One of them will not be saying the correct answer, or mamela botla eduso. Have a look, move across to the biur halacha, please. Bit small, I know where it says nimtu devrei mechuvonim lama shenoda b'cheshbon. The line is shenoda, about 10 lines down. Hinei hameiri, one of the meforshim mafarish, nimtzu divrei mechuvonim zeh lo zeh. That's normally what it means. Is there testimony in line with each other? Or pirush rabbeinu tomua. It's very strange. Doho, kahai governor like this we find in Sanhedrin. I won't take you through all of this. Anyway, at length, so as not to say, if we can go back now to seeing each other. Let me tell you what his answer says. You can look that up, the Shekel HaKodesh, wonderful, of Reb Chaim. And his answer is this. If you have two people testifying about a murder that took place, you want to make sure their testimony is in line. When it comes to the moon, it's not that they're testing. Of course, A must equal B. But that doesn't tell you necessarily that it's absolutely correct. You know what the answer's meant to be, and that's C. You know, in fact, there's an earlier Rambam that explains you've got to be the Bezdin has to be extremely well versed in astronomy to know exactly size, where it's going to be, and everything else. Therefore, they check not that A equals B, yeah, or Yankel equals Shimon, if you like, or Jack equals Harry. It's not A equals B, but that A equals C. C is the correct answer. Astronomically, you've got to check that A equals C and B equals C. And then, of course, A equals B. Brilliant. That's how he explains Pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam says here, it doesn't mean what it normally means. It means that as well. Of course, A has to equal B, but the way you get A equaling B is A has got to equal C, the knowledge that you've got already. Then you check that B equals C. Therefore, A equals B, QED. With me? And that explains the Shekel HaKodesh is pshat in the Rambam. And that is pshat in this Gemara too, viewed in this Mishnah. If their edus is in line, A equaling B, but how do you get A equal B? It's not just A equals B. A equals C, B equals C, A equals B. Beautiful. That's what the Rambam means. Is that very pretty indeed? Very nice. And with that, gentlemen, we'll leave you for tonight. Yeah, it's a deal.
What is Shekel HaKodesh?
I'm sorry, Shekel HaKodesh, one of his Sforim.
Reb Chaim Kanievsky.
Yes, one of.
Right.
And